It's a mixed verdict, but it is a stunning victory for the defense.
After months of graphic testimony, high-profile allegations, and viral media moments, Sean Diddy Combs now sits in federal custody, guilty of transporting 2 women across state lines for illicit reasons, but acquitted of the most serious charges, racketeering and trafficking.
That is 5 counts. We have a mixed verdict here. Again, count 1 as it relates to racketeering, not guilty. Count 2 as it relates to sex trafficking, not guilty. Count 3, guilty. Count 4, not guilty. Count 5, guilty.
It's what legal experts call a split verdict. To the defense, it's a win. To the prosecution, it's a setback. And to the public, it's confusing, because if what was described in court really happened, if the freak-offs, surveillance, and violence were all real, then how did the jury not see it as trafficking?
But I've completely lost faith in the system here. I have to imagine this is all just now horseradish and barnacles. I think he will probably just get away with like 6 months probation.
Diddy didn't testify. His lawyers called no witnesses, but they avoided a mandatory 15-year sentence by picking apart the government's theory of criminal enterprise. No RICO, no trafficking, just 2 Mann Act violations. Now Diddy's awaiting sentencing, and the rest of the industry is dead silent. Suge Knight says that silence isn't new, it's how the system works. This video breaks down how the verdict landed, why the racketeering charge collapsed, and what it reveals about who gets protected and why. Diddy was convicted of 2 out of 5 federal charges, both for violating the Mann Act, a 1910 law that makes it illegal to cross state lines with someone for the purpose of immoral acts. But he was acquitted on the most serious charges, racketeering, conspiracy, and trafficking, and so to his supporters, it seemed like a victory.
Do it, Diddy dance! Come on! Hey, do it, Diddy dance!
That split verdict wasn't just a technicality, it exposed the limits of what prosecutors could prove and where the jury drew the line.
You can never predict what a jury will do, ever. And nobody out there saw those freak-off tapes or all the videos other than the jury. So
the racketeering charge required prosecutors to show that Diddy was part of a criminal enterprise, that he worked with others to commit a pattern of crimes, and that those crimes included specific predicate acts like trafficking, bribery, or obstruction. But the jury didn't buy that there was a functioning criminal organization behind Diddy's behavior. Even though the Mann Act convictions technically could have supported the RICO charge, jurors didn't see enough coordination or long-term structure to convict on racketeering. According to post-verdict commentary, they either didn't believe there was a conspiracy or they didn't believe the enterprise even existed. The trafficking charges fell apart for similar reasons. To convict under federal law, prosecutors had to prove force, fraud, or coercion as the means by which Diddy arranged certain encounters involving third parties. They also had to show that the women involved were under sustained control, physically, financially, or psychologically, but even with graphic testimony, including surveillance footage and stories of threats, drugs, and so-called freak-offs, the jury wasn't convinced those encounters met the legal threshold.
It seems as though the jury, though, was more persuaded by the defense's position, which is that the girlfriends were willing participants in these encounters. Is that right?
Either that or that they just didn't believe beyond a reasonable doubt that they were coerced.
There was no evidence of document confiscation, isolation, or total dependency. The defense used old text messages and framed the relationships as dysfunctional but voluntary. And prosecutors didn't call a single trafficking expert to explain the deeper dynamics of control. That's why the Mann Act charges stuck. Unlike trafficking or RICO, the Mann Act has a much lower bar. Prosecutors didn't have to prove violence or coercion, just that Diddy used interstate travel to facilitate certain illegal arrangements. The jury agreed, finding him guilty on those counts, but rejecting the idea of a larger criminal operation or trafficking network. His sentencing will be based on those Mann Act charges.
starting his base offense level is I think a level 14, which puts him in the 15 to 21 month range. And then there's some enhancements that could go on top of that. If they say he's a leader, things of that nature, he may be more so looking at the 51 to 61 month range. So I think he's looking at months to years realistically, but he will always be a convicted felon.
In the end, Diddy didn't beat the case, but he beat the system that prosecutors were trying to build around him. He avoided a mandatory 15-year minimum and possible life behind bars. He avoided being labeled a trafficker, and he avoided the one thing that scared the industry most, being branded as someone who ran an operation. What the verdict said, loud and clear, is that bad behavior, even when documented, doesn't automatically add up to organized crime. And in this case, that distinction might have saved him. While all of this has been playing out in court, Suge Knight decided to speak up, and what he said caught a lot of people off guard. His most recent appearance was on a podcast with Aubrey O'Day, where he started talking about Diddy, the trial, and the silence coming from the rest of the music industry. But that wasn't the first time he said it. He's been calling it out for months, on Piers Morgan, on Chris Cuomo, saying the same thing over and over. That nobody's talking because they're scared of losing their careers, scared of crossing the wrong people. According to him, the real power in hip-hop isn't the streets, it's the boardrooms. He called out specific people too, Mary J. Blige, Mace, Faith Evans, said they knew what was going on and still went quiet. Not out of loyalty, out of survival. He said they were slaves to the system, and if they ever told the truth, they'd lose everything.
Go to prison. You know Puffy not going to go to prison. They been knew that Puffy was beating these women. They been knew what Puffy was doing with these men. They been knew. I told the people before that in Hollywood, and by the way, they never tried it with me. In Hollywood, we go out there with Andre Young, we go out there with Puffy, we go out with any of these people that used to be in that building. They go talk to Jimmy and all these other guys. Russell Simmons, Andre Arell, they had the thing where they take a hard-boiled egg. And it sounds nasty, but if the egg can go in these guys' rectum and it don't bust, they think they're doing a great job.
And the wild part is, Knight and Diddy have hated each other for decades. This isn't about defending him. He even said it. He's not on Diddy's side. He's using this moment to say what no one else will, that the silence isn't accidental. It's built in. And the people who stay quiet usually have the most to lose.
How could every person who's involved with Puffy is not on the stand? Except for Puffy. I get at some point, the law got to be blind.
I say this to say, Knight's not trying to save Diddy. He's showing how deep the rot goes, and based on the way he talks, it doesn't sound like he's guessing. It sounds like he's already seen it all. Which brings us to Cassie Ventura. Cassie's testimony during the trial was emotional, detailed, and disturbing. It played a big role in the Mann Act conviction. Her account helped prosecutors prove that Travel was involved in setting up some of the most graphic and controlled encounters, but in the eyes of the jury, it still wasn't enough to prove that Diddy was running a trafficking ring or a criminal enterprise. The bigger conspiracy didn't land, but one moment in her testimony stood out, and it involved Knight. She said there was a point during one of the freak-offs when someone told Diddy that Knight was nearby. Diddy stopped everything, got up, left, said he was going to confront Knight at Mel's Diner. According to Cassie, the whole mood shifted, like Diddy forgot what he was doing and snapped into something else. Later, Knight was asked about it. He didn't laugh, didn't deny it. He said, "Good thing they didn't show up. Somebody would have got hurt." And coming from Knight, it doesn't sound like a throwaway comment. It fits into something bigger. Diddy's behavior, those mood swings, the paranoia, the constant need to control. Knight says it didn't just show up one day. He says it's a pattern, something that started way before Diddy, something passed down and repeated.
You said early on, you can't just look at Diddy in isolation. You said this was done to him. He learned from others, and it was done to him, and then he did to others. To me, That sounds like what I hear when people are talking about abusive situations.
This isn't some one-off meltdown. Knight's saying this is what the industry does. It builds people up, breaks them down, and trains them to do the same thing to everybody else.
Most important thing is there's got to be a solution, because this has been going on in the industry for a whole bunch of years, for decades. And at the same time, you know, nobody wants this to be true, and it shouldn't have to be true.
So when Knight says Diddy spiraled, snapping on people, grabbing for power, losing it in private, it lines up. And if he's right, then this goes way past one man. I say this to say, maybe the real problem isn't who Diddy became. Maybe it's who the industry taught him to be. This verdict wasn't just about Diddy. It was about how the music industry handles rot. Suge Knight has been calling out the silence for years, but the silence isn't the disease. It's a feature. It's what the industry does when someone with power gets caught doing what everyone around them quietly enabled. And the fact that the racketeering charge didn't stick, that the enterprise framing collapsed, is exactly why so many insiders weren't nervous. Because this business doesn't see itself as an enterprise. It sees itself as entertainment. Diddy isn't the first figure to be accused of disturbing behavior while still maintaining institutional support. R. Kelly toured for years after public accusations. Labels kept signing him. Radio stations kept playing him. Spotify didn't pull his catalog until the documentaries came out. Dr. Luke has writing credits on top Billboard hits today, years after Kesha accused him of assault and coercion. Chris Brown's career rebounded despite multiple assault allegations, and executives kept taking his calls. Even when allegations are public, proven, or on video, the industry's first instinct is to delay, deny, or distance, never to dismantle, because it's not about what happened. It's about who controls the money when it does. The structure that surrounded Diddy, the managers, assistants, lawyers, promoters, label reps, all of it exists to keep the star operational and the brand intact. If those people start testifying, start naming names, the entire food chain gets exposed. That's why the industry doesn't want trials. It wants settlements, confidential ones, quick ones, because trials don't just threaten the artist, they threaten the infrastructure. Suge Knight wasn't talking about loyalty. He was talking about survival. Everyone at the top knows where the bodies are buried, and the verdict didn't challenge that, it reinforced it. The message is clear. As long as the worst thing you do can be pinned on individual behavior instead of structural complicity, the machine keeps moving. And the people who helped build it, they stay out of the spotlight. Do you think Diddy deserved the verdict he got? Let me know in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.